Welcome to Podtification, the show where three pastors sit around displaying their sharp wit and their occasionally sharp theology. We hope you enjoy. Now let's get on to the show.
Here we go. We're recording.
All right, here we are. Welcome back to Podtification. They said it couldn't be done. We have done it all the way up to a baker's dozen episodes. Right here back with us in studio, in person, Shaun Stotine.
In digital person. In digital
well,
person.
This
I'm
is as
back.
in person as it gets.
Yep,
yeah.
for providential number 13.
So you look good, Shaun. Is that a different room you're in, or is that
I went
glamour?
full-blown narcissist for this.
Yeah.
I got myself one of those fancy ring lights. I got a better webcam. I've got a fancy new microphone, which hopefully is picking me up pretty well. In anticipation of having to do a lot of Zoom stuff with students this semester, wanted to make sure that I am understandable and easily seen, and hopefully that works out in my favor instead of my detriment.
Well, so it's like, is it analogous to, you remember the glamour shots photographs? Is this like the glamour shots of Zoom meetings? Is that right?
Sure, I never did one of those, Brent. Why don't you tell me more about it?
Let me.
Brent Glamour Shot Davini.
Yeah.
Actually, Shaun,
search that on
don't search
Google.
that on Google, please. Shaun, you were telling me you've been using a new exfoliating face wash. Is that right?
Yeah, it's called
kind
Prickly
of
Pineapple.
Prickly Pineapple face wash.
Nice.
Yeah, no, it gets rid of blemishes really well. So you're looking sharp. It's actually funny that I feel like this is a callback, and I mean, Podtification fans can check me on this, but I'm reasonably certain that this was during a Podtification episode where I said something to you, Shaun, like, how you doing? And you said, doing really well, except I have this big zit on my face.
Yeah, I think that was
I'm
like
pretty
the
sure
first
that
one.
was that our first episode?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
So now I've lit up my face even more, just in case I have one in the future.
Thanks to that Prickly Pineapple face wash.
It's working.
Pristine.
Yeah.
Not a pore to be seen. Well, welcome back, Shaun. Shaun was on sabbatical. And we continued to be pressed on in the podcast without him, and had some guests on, and lo and behold, we're still back, and Shaun's still back. Shaun, tell us in 15 words. Tell us about your sabbatical.
Okay. I had a good sabbatical. God taught me many things. Thanks for all the fishes.
Wow. 7 weeks worth right there. Well, welcome back. You were missed. It's good to have you. Brent, here you are.
That's the best we can say, huh?
No, it was we pressed on. We had guests from our church, Daybreak Church, where the three of us serve as pastors and love doing that. But we had guests from our church come and share, and that was really a fun thing to kind of just share different. Here's some wisdom really from people in our congregation, which was super cool. But here we are back, the Three Musketeers together again for another episode of Podtification. Looking forward to it. Brent, what is going on in your life, man?
Well, I'm redundant with my answer. My redundant answer has been getting ready for my mother-in-law to get here. Your
redundant answer is just looking forward to normalcy or return to normalcy, or I just want things to be back to normal or whatever.
So I don't know if that'll ever happen.
I know. Yeah.
So now my mother-in-law's here. That's going well. Her furniture hopefully will arrive tomorrow. And so it still hasn't gotten here. It's behind. And I got a septic, and I'm growing grass. So my life is consumed about watering grass right now. And so I can't wait to see my water bill. That's all.
Where are we at with the grass?
It's in that like
progress.
fuzzy phase, kind of a peach fuzz kind of coming up everywhere in the backyard. And so
are you keeping the dogs off of it?
As best I can. I mean, where else are they going to go? I mean, it's kind of like they got to go out there, not in here to the bathroom. So it's kind of like as best you can kind of thing. So
I'm glad, just for the record, I'm glad that you don't have your dogs go to the bathroom in your house. I'm glad we've established that.
Not on purpose.
Yeah, right.
Not on purpose. Ella does whatever she wants, but for the most part goes outside. So. All
right, so grass growing, that's excellent. Excited to hear more about that. Excited to go over there and watch it with you.
Watch the grass grow.
Yeah, I hear that's exciting.
Isn't it interesting how once you pass a certain age, your life becomes consumed with growing grass? Like, man, that's what we look forward to as adults now. I'm trying to grow some nice grass over here.
Man, can I go next? Because you kind of segued into the thing that I feel like where maybe Brent's answers to what's going on in his life every week have been a little bit redundant. A lot of mine have had themes, like things that I've noticed as patterns in my life. And I feel like a big one has been just revelations about how I'm getting more and more into what I would consider older person hobbies. We talked a little bit about watching birds and watching flowers and stuff on this podcast. And bats. Well, that's ageless. Everybody loves bats, but you, Brent. I tell you though, I discovered like kind of in that same vein, something else that I'm kind of ashamed to admit this, but I'll just be honest. I'll be raw with you guys, just the three of us. I got so excited last week when I realized it was trash day and that the guys were coming to pick up our dumpsters. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, it's Wednesday night. We get to put our dumpsters out and they're going to come take it away. I'm so happy about this. And I thought to myself, I was like, how can this be like the highlight of my week, that it's trash day and that we get to empty out our dumpsters? But I kid you not, I was thrilled. I was so excited. I was like, I'm wheeling these things out and they're going to be empty tomorrow. And I heard the trash trucks come on Thursday and it was the greatest.
Music to your ears, huh?
It was literally, absolutely, music to my ears.
Well, I'm going to give you a potential out, and you can take it if you want it. But I don't know if that has as much to do with age as the fact that in quarantine season, it's the small things that make our life worth living. It's like something you can count on the calendar and be like, oh yes, it's Thursday, or whatever day your trash guy comes.
Absolutely. I think you're right. I think part of it, I think a lot of the reason that so many things like this have been happening is quarantine. The other part is that I don't know if you guys are in the same boat. Our trash comes every other week. So yes. we have the guys come every other week. So that if you miss a week,
you're in trouble.
You're in trouble. You're waiting. It's a month. Right?
That's what I was going to say. That's not music to my ears, because when I hear it, it used to be early in the morning. And it used to like wake me up and I'm thinking, oh, did I put it out? Did I put it out? Because you would hear the trash coming and then you have this panic attack of, oh, did I put it out? So that to me, it's more of a not music to my ears.
By the time I've heard, if I hear it, it's too late. They come at they seriously come at about 5:30 at our house. And if you hear it, it's game over. Like, there's just no way. They're already
picturing you like in your pajamas running down the road. Wait.
It's happened before that I went out in my pajamas because they come to our house and they do a U-turn and go back the other way. And I've caught them before, like doing their U-turn. And I'm pulling my thing across the street so I can like stop them. Definitely has happened before.
Well, it'd been funny if they had just kept going.
They just wave. See you in 2 weeks, sucker. Yeah, so that's I would say, like, as I appreciate the out, Shaun. I don't know if it's a confession or just that's what place I'm at in life right now. But that was a huge point in my life, and I just felt like I'd share it with you guys. So,
well, thank you for your trash talk. Talk.
What about you, GQ? What's going on in your life?
Well, Glamour, you mean my fancy ring light and glamour shots?
That's right.
Yeah, and the prickly pineapple face scrub. I'm looking forward to students coming back to campus. It's going to look different this year, but I've been really excited. They've been moving in this week. Everything's kind of staggered. Usually move-in all happened on one day, and the entire city of Burlington seems to kind of explode overnight.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of a slow progression, which I'm sure is putting a lot of ease on the city as a whole, but also probably a little bit of anxiety on everybody too as they're coming back, because I know everybody's wondering, when all these students get back in here, what is that going to do to the numbers? How is that going to affect things? Can we still go out? I'm not looking at all of that. I'm just looking at the fact that I kind of have a job to do again. I've gotten to do a lot of that online, but that's not the same. We're still going to be doing a lot of things online, but ultimately I have the opportunity now to at least see some students again, because our year got cut short last year. We did a lot of things online, but I didn't get to physically see people basically from spring break on. I didn't get to say goodbye to people at the end of the year in a proper way. I didn't get to have one-on-one meetings with students in a proper way. So that's got me really excited that I'm going to get to do that again. I know that there is always that possibility. We've been seeing that around the country, that some campuses have opened and already are shutting down. But even if I get a little bit of time with them, that's something I can rejoice over.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that is big. I think that's probably, you're right, big for our whole community.
Yeah.
Maybe just one notch below garbage day as far as big
one
for our
notch
whole
below
community.
garbage day. Okay. It's good to know where we sit.
So I was just curious, because there's several daybreakers that are returning college students, but they were given the opportunity to do virtual versus in person, right?
Yes.
And so are they coming back? Are they doing virtual? Or
some of them have decided to stay home and do virtual. Some of them are coming back.
Mixed bag.
I can appreciate the predicament they probably found themselves in.
Yeah.
And the decision, I'm sure, wasn't an easy decision, but I also lamented a little bit because I really enjoy seeing people in person.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Don't we all? Most of us.
Most people.
Most people.
I don't know. You might have to walk around now with your glamour light everywhere you go, because you're kind of raising the bar for appearance now, and people see you in person. It's like, it's like meeting a hero, that's not shorter than I thought.
You don't look as good as I thought you did.
That's been my life. Okay. So not with you. Sorry. That's not what I meant.
I've got some prickly pineapple for you.
So let's move on. I got a question for you guys here. So none of us meet the criteria for Vermonter, which is a pretty strict criteria.
Yes.
But none of us are even actually even have any kind of claim to that at all. We're all imported, right? Some of us more than others.
I'm married a Vermonter.
Well, that
still doesn't make you a Vermonter.
I know it doesn't make me one, but I have a slightly.
None of us were born in Vermont, right? They grew up in Vermont.
Three.
Some of us aren't even from this country, but they.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah.
The question here is a little bit of a regional question. I'm actually kind of interested to hear your guys' answers about this. And we'll start with maybe this one's tougher, but I'm pretty interested. The question is about kind of language and kind of regional language. So the question is this: being from places other than Vermont, what colloquialism or idioms or sayings do you use that confuse people in Vermont? That people here just don't, maybe confuses or like a double take? Like, can you think of something from, where you hail from where you kind of come from, that you would say that people here don't normally say? Can you guys think of anything?
I can think, Yeah. Initially, and you guys probably won't even, well, I don't know. You were in New Mexico. I don't know if this is Louisiana only, but the devil's beating his wife. Have you ever heard that phrase?
I've heard the phrase. Doesn't it have something to do with thunder?
When it's raining and the sun's shining, you say, look, the devil's beating his wife. And I when I said that the first time in Vermont, I was ostracized and like made fun of, and they were like, what does that even mean? And I just thought that was like a, national
Interesting
phrase. And so of note, I've never met anybody in Vermont except one person, and they weren't from Vermont, they were from Africa, who actually recognized the phrase. And she said to me, in my country, it means an animal's having a baby. And I was like, oh, in Louisiana, it means it's raining and the sun is shining. So anyway, the devil's beating his wife. That's
wow.
That's my phrase. Yeah.
I,
You can't match that, can you?
no, actually, I'll be honest with you. I didn't really have a good answer for this question. I have something, but it's not anything like that. I was genuinely trying to rack my brain for any kind of saying like that from New Mexico. There's got to be one. But I feel like that's such a Southern thing, like colloquialisms like that. Like, is that wrong? Maybe I'm revealing my ignorance here. But I feel like that's such a Southern, like something about, like, there's a lot of sayings like that are kind of mean particular things.
There certainly are, I think, more sayings that have a uniquely Southern kind of derivation.
You were in Georgia. No, Shaun lived in Georgia.
I did live in Georgia. So I've lived a lot of different places. We moved to the States when I was about 4, and I've lived in Nebraska and Illinois and Georgia and New York and Vermont. So I don't know if I ever really picked up a whole lot of colloquialisms because I was never anywhere long enough to really work one into my regular vernacular, but I've heard a lot of them. And the majority of the ones that I've heard came from the South. I think there is just a more, I guess, poetic or literary way of speaking in the South, using
That's a nice way to put it.
Well, no, I really mean that,
yeah,
know.
Like the devil's beating his wife.
Yeah.
Poetry.
No,
no, I get what you're saying. Continue. I agree with you. Yeah.
It's just more fun. It's not always as plain. It makes conversation more interesting and engaging. So I think a lot of that does tend to reside in the South. But I think there are other colloquialisms that have arisen in different places, and it might not be in the form of a phrase so much as maybe just different terminology for something.
Yeah.
Like soda versus pop versus Coke versus soft drink, right? Those are or Vermont's famous creamy versus soft serve. So
that's most of what I came up with were words, like just vocabulary. Because I definitely say y'all here, and I've gotten a lot of like people kind of like, what did you just say? Like that's definitely something that's not typical here, although it doesn't require translation, I feel like. But I do feel like when I came here and said y'all, like in New Mexico, people thought that was kind of goofy, but it didn't really stand out. But here I feel like it's pretty rare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But that was really the only thing I could think of. And that's not really New Mexican. Like in New Mexico, a lot of the language is like results in kind of a hybridization of Spanish and English.
Mm-hmm.
And so they speak Spanglish there. And so a lot of they kind of stick words together, but I wouldn't even say that there's really anything like that. You just hear sentences that have both languages in them. And, so I had a hard time coming up with that. On the other hand, like things that Vermonters say that's like bizarre.
Right.
There's quite a few of those. Shaun, you mentioned creamy.
Yeah.
Which that definitely I think is unique here. You have your a chocolate creamy, or like a vanilla creamy, or my personal favorite, the prickly pineapple creamy. That one is good.
Way to work that in.
That's whenever I go. I challenge you. Whenever you go to like Al's or Rocky's or the Village Scoop, whatever, ask them if they have prickly pineapple, because that is the flavor that you don't want. I mean, a lot of people don't know, they don't have it on the menu.
Secret menu, man.
It's a secret menu item. Yeah.
Menu.
Pet peeve, but if you know, then you know. So that's definitely the one you want to ask for, but you have to ask. Creamy is one. The other one I was thinking of that I honestly I take a little bit personally, Flatlander.
Yeah.
Coming, like where I lived is higher than anywhere else in Vermont will ever be. At 7,000 feet, nowhere in Vermont will ever be as high as where I came from, and yet I'm still called a Flatlander.
You were
like
still
that,
called a Flatlander.
That seems a little bit weird to me.
Yeah.
And I always kind of snigger at that, but I think that's definitely a Vermont thing. That's like, I think everybody knows.
I think snicker is a New Mexico word.
No, I've heard that.
Yeah?
I don't know if it's uniquely New Mexican.
Have you heard it in Vermont?
I don't hear it very frequently, no.
Yeah.
So I can't say it's a Vermont word, but I've never lived in New Mexico and I've heard it. So
I bring all kinds of culture to Vermont.
Had you ever heard of All Set before you moved here?
Yeah.
Had you, Jesse?
No. Oh,
No.
All set, like you're ready to go?
Well, it can mean anything. It means you're done, you're ready to go.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
I'd never.
What about here's the one that I think that people here are blind to, because I think they like Vermonters will admit Flatlander, that's a Vermont thing, and if they were honest, they'd admit that it's ridiculous, but we'll leave that alone. Creamy, definitely a Vermont thing, and they're proud of that. The one that and maybe this isn't Vermont, but the one that I picked up on that confused me the most is camp.
Oh, yeah.
That confused me for the longest time when we moved here. And maybe it's not just Vermont. Maybe I'm the weird one here. But for me, camp can mean like you're going camping, like with tents, or you go to summer camp, like for like a week or something like that. But here, camp is like your summer house, right? And that's like a thing where the word just make it mean whatever you want.
Yeah, I think I could be wrong about this, but I think that's even more just a New England thing.
Maybe it's New England, yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'll agree with that. When I first moved here, it took me a while to catch on that.
Yeah, I just thought that was, to me, that was bizarre. It's like, oh, we're going to camp. Don't feel like you're using that word right.
Now all the Vermonters that are listening are tuning out.
Tuning out, yeah. Well, that's all right. We don't need you, mountain. What is the Vermonters? What's the opposite of Flatlander? Is it just Vermonter?
I guess.
Mountain dwellers. It seems kind of rude. I don't know why.
And now the only people listening to us are your New Mexican friends, right?
That's right. Shout out. Oh, yeah, I'm not going to say any of those. Those are going to sound super rude if I say them here. Okay. Any others? You guys want to think of any others? I don't want to cut you off.
Dooryard. Ever heard of that?
No.
That is old school Vermonters. And I still don't know exactly what it means. It's sort of like outside your front door, your dooryard.
Of course, your dooryard.
Yeah. And so you have to be probably 70 or older Vermonter to use that term, in my experience.
One time Dwayne started talking to me. Yeah, he was talking to me. He said, "Yeah, I'm like a Vermonter or whatever," and he started speaking to me. He said, "But you don't know how Vermonters talk." And then he started talking, and he said stuff like words that I didn't understand at all. And maybe
He could do he actually did at our variety show one year, did a stand-up comedy routine as an old Vermonter, actually. He did a good job. Yeah.
And it was a whole nother language.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
Dooryard.
I bet Dwayne. We'll have to ask Dwayne. He knows what a dooryard is.
Dooryard. Yeah. I'm gonna ask him. Yeah.
If you know what it is, leave one in the comments.
Yeah. That's right. Better yet, if you want to define it in the comments. Right. And also tell me how that prickly pineapple creamy was. So, should we move on to our article to discuss, fellers?
Let's do it.
So once again, as kind of is our custom, we have an article here to discuss. It kind of relates to biblical culture, biblical society here. It's a article it's in the Christian Post, written by Leah. I'm going to say Leah Cleet. I don't know.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Leah is a big time listener of the podcast. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Leah. I apologize. I should know your name by now. But she writes, the title of the article is this: Tony Evans warns that Satan is attacking biblical manhood, society on precipice of disaster. So she's doing it's an article that Leah wrote that kind of quoting a little bit of a Tony Evans article or TV show or movie or something like that. So once again, we'll kind of read some excerpts from this article and ask some questions about it. We'll discuss it. We'll have the link to the article in the description as usual, so you can access that and read along with us or check it out for yourself. Okay. So you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Good.
Buckled in, Brent?
Good.
Yeah, okay. All right. I was trying to think about a way to use dooryard in that sentence, and I couldn't come up. All right. I'll read
my
here.
dooryard here.
You're sitting in your door. Okay. Satan is determined to undermine men, destroy their God-given roles, and redefine the biblical definition of manhood, because he wants to see the family unravel and society crumble, Pastor Tony Evans has warned. And I think, first of all, it's kind of you guys might have heard the term clickbait, where it's kind of a hook, something to just grab hold of you. And I feel like this first sentence here in this article is a little bit of that, just a little bit of that kind of hooks into you. Mm-hmm. Interested to hear what your guys' thoughts are. First of all, I'll read this sentence again, and I just want to hear what phrase or words or something that stand out to you as kind of whoa, where is this coming from? So I'll just read this again. I just want you to hear it. Satan is determined to undermine men, destroy their God-given roles, and redefine the biblical definition of manhood, because he wants to see the family unravel and society crumble, Pastor Tony Evans has warned. What kind of stood out to you in that phrase?
Well, to use your phrase, sort of a clickbait. I mean, so Tony Evans, I would think most of the listeners will recognize him. Great man with a great ministry in Dallas, Texas. I'll actually never forget the time I visited his church, because the thing that struck me the most was how
dooryard, right as you walk into.
As I walked into the dooryard of the church and looked at the choir was very multiracial, and this was in Dallas, Texas, in the 90s, and it was a large portion of white, black, and Hispanic, which is pretty much the makeup of Dallas. And, I just thought that's just really cool to see in the South, a multiracial church, and something that he was very intentional about. And he's actually wrote a book I think it's called Oneness Embraced, about racism, which is a very timely book to read now. He's an African-American man himself, and grew up in the South, went to college and seminary in the South. And so just a really neat guy. But all that to say is, I say this with the utmost respect, is I'm always hesitant to sort of be alarmist in the way that I phrase things. As I get older, I'm more apt to do that than I used to be. But I always, I don't know, I guess after being 50 years, you hear a Christian leader say, this is what's happening, this is this is gonna cause this to happen, or this is God doing this. I'm always a little hesitant to sort of use that dogmatic of language.
So
I do think he's right. I do think he's right, but I just think it's pretty dogmatic sort of language, if you will.
You mean to kind of be ascribing
the end of society
motivation, where he says Satan is determined to do this?
Well, to me, I think Satan is determined. That
okay.
Doesn't bother me. I mean, it just seems to me, the Bible says about Satan, he's to steal, kill, and destroy.
Yeah.
And it just seems to me that Satan, that's obviously in his venue. But the idea of saying, this is a strategy in society, and society, this could be the end of society. I think there's some truth in that, but I'm just, and I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying I'm always hesitant to sort of use dogmatic language. Like people talking about the coronavirus, for example, saying, this is what God is doing, or this is what the devil is doing. I don't disagree with all of those statements, but I just say, I think just stepping back, letting a little time go by, trying to use a little discernment, because I guess my fear is, and not about this article, but just to talk dogmatically about what's happening in society or what God is doing, is that 10 years from now, you'll look back and say, no, that wasn't exactly what was happening. And you lose credibility. Not so much you lose credibility, but the gospel could lose some credibility. So anyway, that's a long answer to a first impression there.
Sure.
I think, I think there's truth in that in certain circumstances, but in this kind of circumstance, I think that phrase, that kind of statement, it's meant to make you sit up and take notice. It is a profoundly countercultural statement to make, because we don't talk about Satan. Countercultural, both in the church and outside of the church. I don't think we frequently talk about Satan. We spend a lot of time talking about God, which is appropriate. That's what we should do as the church. But Jesus spent a lot of time talking about the adversary. Like you said, he seeks to steal, kill, and destroy. He prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And so a statement like that makes you sit up and take notice, but when you take a moment to think about it, you're like, yeah, that jives with what we know in Scripture about who Satan is and what his character is. And so it's not something that is out of the realm of possibility. And in fact, beyond just possibility, it sounds like exactly what his MO is. It's to destroy what God has designed. And so, but I think that kind of caution still does bear out in certain kind of statements, like you were talking about COVID, or as some individuals have made comments about Katrina in the past, and those different kinds of things. Like those are dangerous and they're divisive. But I'm not sure what he's doing here is intentionally being divisive. I think he's just trying to call attention, like for evaluation. So
yeah, I think that's well said. Maybe his doesn't per se, but just in general, being careful with those things.
No, I think it's good to exercise caution.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. I think just as far as I know we have way more to get into with this article, but the idea of there's kind of like the first half of the statement, which is that Satan is determined to do this, redefine the biblical definition of manhood, just undermine, destroy men. And then the other half of that is he's doing that because, and then he fills that in with because he wants to see family unravel and society crumble, which I think is kind of an interesting, like when you say like motivation there, I think that's kind of an interesting kind of motivation to give to the enemy. And I just haven't really thought too much about that. I certainly don't think that he would necessarily be against that. But I feel like maybe his goals are even maybe a little bit bigger than society crumbling. Like as far as like, I don't even really totally know what that means. I assume that means American society. But anyway, we can continue on because there's way more to get into here, where this is really just kind of the headline.
Spend the next 15 minutes just on the headline.
Yeah, just on that. Like, what is he thinking? What about, I mean, just this notion, I mean, granted, I'm assuming things. I'm not sure we're supposed to do this anymore, but we're all men.
Yes.
Okay. I should have had us open this discussion with our pronouns, right? We're gonna trigger Brent here. But we're all men. Here's this idea of, do you guys think the idea of manhood, the biblical definition of manhood, do you think that's under attack?
Yeah.
Well, here, I noticed this years ago without someone pointing it out to me. But I have 4 children, and so I've went through a lot of Disney sort of shows in my life. and I know, and I like the majority of them, have watched them, still watch them, but it caught me after like the third or fourth one that I think Caitlin was into, that the husband in that show was sort of a doofus, if you will.
Yeah, like a
and it was just a subliminal kind of thing, and then I just started paying attention to it, and then so yeah, I think it's something, to Tony Evans' point, the Bible talks about the devil being, having strategies and schemes. But it just seems like in culture, there's been a response. And I think he mentions this later in the article, maybe rightfully so, to sort of bounce back sort of the bad aspects and bad, the negative things that have happened in the name of masculinity, is sort of a reaction to that. But to now make men seem like doofuses and not intelligent or not confident or not solid or not loving or not serving or not sacrificing. You know what I mean? I noticed that is just in Disney shows, and I was like, that's kind of weird that they're sort of being derogatory towards men in their shows, and I don't think it was a conscious thing. It was just sort of a cultural reaction of sorts. So.
I've totally noticed that maybe just on a more everyday level in advertisement, like in almost every any kind of household advertising. Anything about kids, anything about a household, men are almost always kind of shown, kind of to your point, kind of to be inept, kind of foolish, kind of lovable doofuses, right? I mean, almost always lovable, but usually like a child, basically,
Yeah.
And it's kind of one of those things that once you notice it, you think, oh, that's actually kind of awful. I think to your point, yeah, it's like there's maybe this is a correction, a really unhealthy correction of what, as I think we'll quote here, something called toxic masculinity, where it's kind of what you were saying, kind of a lot of the bad things that have happened from like that men have done historically and even currently. But is the correction really to just kind of depict men as kind of foolish, childish, harmless, kind of bumbling? Is that really the correction? Probably not.
Yeah.
I would agree. I think there is like a lot of kind of, I don't even know if it's, and maybe it's intentional, I don't know, but there's a lot of kind of subconscious stuff, images out there that I think really can be harmful. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, if you compare it to like the 50s, 60s, 70s, men, again, I think there's some stereotypes that were negative to women and maybe in those shows, but the men were not portrayed in that way, and I think I just think there's a message. I mean, that if you look at the men in those shows, they're not worthy of respect, I guess is the best way to say it. And the kids don't give them respect, and the wives don't give them respect, not in the sense of in a negative way, but just healthy respect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
let's move along.
Yep.
Yeah.
The current chaplain of the NBA's, quoting again from the article here, of the NBA's Dallas Mavericks, explained that the reason behind the current attack on manhood is twofold. First of all, men have failed to be the men that God wants them to be, which has opened up the gap which has been filled with a redefinition of manhood and attacks against men, he said. So in part, it's due to men's failure. Would you agree or would you disagree? Kind of how have men or could men be failing in this area?
I'd probably be more interested to just hear him kind of tease that out a little bit more, explain where he's coming from. Not because I disagree, but I want to know what I'm agreeing with. Like how does he arrive at that conclusion? Because that's an easy kind of soundbite to say, but there's got to be a lot of thought that came with that wasn't communicated in the article.
Let me read a little bit more. There's a little bit more to his quote that maybe I should have read also.
Yeah.
I don't think it really gets to what you're saying, but maybe it helps a little bit more. The other thing that is happening outside of the men themselves is the shift in culture, which has created some of this redefinition and brought about men abandoning their roles, which I think maybe he's going to explain a little about what he thinks those roles are. Dumbing down their roles, rejecting their roles. So there's this toxic environment against manhood, but unfortunately, we've contributed to it. So he doesn't really say what their roles are.
I mean, if I were to speculate, I'd probably say it's something along the lines of it's this probably cyclical element of expectation hasn't been communicated about what the role of a man is, and so men haven't been living up to that expectation, which allows there to be this portrayal of what men are, which is kind of that dumbed down version, which continues to lower the bar, which continues to mean that expectations aren't being communicated, which, you know, so it's this kind of like downward spiral. So it is kind of a, you know, we have to own some of that ourselves. Speculation, but again, I'd want to know a little bit more of the detail of where he's coming to on that. But inherently, I think I agree with him.
Sure. Yeah, well, I think, I mean, ultimately I would too. I think, I'm just speaking from a Christian perspective, we might have a lot of like negative expectations or images in front of us of what unhealthy masculinity looks like, whether it's too blah, too feminine, or too hyper controlling or powerful or manipulative or whatever. It could be on any side of that or anywhere in between. But ultimately, we do have scripture, which lays out, I think, the right role for a man in society and in a family.
Yeah.
And so I do think that we actually, a lot of it does fall on us as individuals and as men to not just look to, obviously, to society or to friends or parents, even fathers, for our example, but to look to scripture. I mean, that falls to us as believers, as Christians, but it also falls to us as husbands and fathers and men. So I think, yeah, there's definitely an element that we need to own in this, right? Just personally, I guess.
Yeah, when you say it like that, you know, we do have that standard that's given to us, complete with not just this is what I expect of you, but how to fulfill that expectation. That's also in scripture. And when we look to society, we're making idols, right? And when we're following that standard instead of God's standard, we're making idols, and we're totally culpable at that point. So good point, Jesse. I like that.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Shall we move on, Brent, or did you want to? Okay. The secular world, Evans posited, is confused about the true definition of manhood. Popular terms like toxic masculinity, he said, is society's attempt to understand and define the present poor state of manhood. There are two sides to this, he explained. One is people feeling that men have been oppressive to women, and to some degree that's true. It's women wanting to break free from the toxic effect of that negative pressure. But then on the other side is men having been given the wrong information about manhood from television, from the media, from music, so that they're doing the best that they know how to do. So we've got to give them new knowledge and new definitions. We're going to have to ask the opposite sex to encourage the right definition rather than throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Speaking of interesting colloquialisms, throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Okay, here's a great question. And actually, let's just get personal with the three of us here. The question about kind of the opposite sex encouraging kind of the right definition of what it is to be a man. I'm actually really interested. I'm kind of put all three of us on the spot here, but have you felt like your wives have done this in some way in your relationship, where you feel like your relationship with your wife has kind of brought out the what it means to be a man in you, or that they do something that encourages that in you? Can you guys think of anything in the context of your relationship that encourages the right definition, or that has propelled you into the right definition of manhood?
A phrase that I use when I'm doing premarital counseling, and this was from a sermon from my first pastor, Benny Thompson, and he just said it as a peripheral comment. He said something like, wives, your husbands need to feel like you're their hero. And for whatever, maybe my own, for me personally, I resonated or whatever, but I was like, yeah, I actually think
Hold on, sorry. Need to feel like you're their hero, or husbands need to feel like they're...
So I might have said that incorrectly. Wives, your husbands need to feel like that they are your hero. Thank you for correcting me there. And so, I think, and he alludes to this later, maybe we'll talk about it, the biblical idea of, loving your wife as Christ loved the church, and then wives, love your wife, or wives, submit to your husbands as unto the Lord. And then how that's supposed to work out. I think it reveals the greatest need that men have is respect. The greatest need that women have is unconditional love. Both of us, I think men also need to be unconditionally loved, and women also need to be unconditionally respected. But sort of the way we're wired, I think that's some of our greatest needs. But all that to say is, my wife always makes me feel like I'm, her hero, just in the little things that she does. And so my wife has always done that, even when I didn't deserve it. And she'll, for lack of a better way to say it, like brags on me and encourages me. And I'm not an idiot. I mean, if I didn't have the mother that I have, if I didn't have the wife that I have, if I didn't have, frankly, a lot of women in my life, in my career that I've had, I wouldn't be the man that I am. I've been pretty fortunate that way. So.
I would echo that, Shaun. I hope not to interrupt you, but my answer was really similar, I think, in vein to yours, Brent, and maybe that kind of communicates kind of what you're saying is kind of a general need that men have. But like, Zoe has occasionally just brought up, just out of the blue, something where she says, like, I'm really grateful for the way you provide for our family, or like, I'm really like, I'm happy for the way that you're providing for us, and not in like any kind of formal way, but she'll just kind of mention that. And for me, like, that's such a, like, it's almost like taking a little bit of weight off my shoulders, because I just, for whatever reason, I feel like I need to be able to do that. Like I feel like I need to be like the breadwinner, whatever. But when she just says, like, I really feel like you're doing a good job, providing, leading our family, whatever, like just that little bit of a acknowledgement of that role, and just for what it's worth, from her perspective, like, I'm filling it, and to hear that from her, that I'm filling that role in her estimation, that means a lot to me. It's something that I think probably if I was to say an analogous thing to her, it probably wouldn't mean as much. But just for her to kind of affirm that role that I'm filling, like, I just think you're doing a good job providing for our family. Like, that means a lot to me. Maybe in a way that I couldn't really even totally explain to her.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think just a testimony to what wonderful wives we have, but my story is profoundly similar. I think
it's okay, none of them listens.
But I think probably one of the things that I appreciate, especially because now that we have kids, like, I think this happened a little bit before, but now that we have kids in particular, my wife will go out of her way sometimes just to kind of acknowledge me in front of my children. Kind of like, wow, that's so great. I'm so grateful that Dad made dinner for us tonight, or that he cleaned up the dishes, which, as we know, is not my favorite thing to do, or, what, like those kinds of little acknowledgments, which I'm not doing, mowing the lawn. I go out and mow the lawn, and I do it because I really enjoy mowing the lawn, and I love the way it looks, and I love just being able to step back and just like, wow, look at that nice clean mowed lawn. And Monica will say, thank you for mowing the lawn, it looks good, in front of the kids. It's just those kinds of things. And it's like, I didn't do it for the thanks, but man, that makes me feel like I'm doing a good job, you know, like, and then doing that in front of the kids, especially having a son, because it's like, I want him to look at that and kind of say, oh, that's what a dad is supposed to be, you know? And so then it feels like a double, like I'm providing for her and for him, you know, like a good example. And she's acknowledging that, like she's calling attention to it. She's kind of like, she's like my cheerleader, you know?
Yeah.
So.
No, that's good. I think that's a really important point, is just as far as about the ways that the opposite sexes can really bring out the best in one another in that regard. I think that's a really great point. Let's move along here. The biggest thing a woman can say to a man, I think this is quoting Tony Evans, is, the more you're like that, the more I want to submit to you, because now you're feeding his ego. This term submission, he says, has been woefully misdefined. The same way Jesus had to submit to God the Father, every man has to submit to the lordship of Jesus Christ, he said. So what he's asking his wife, he should be modeling himself. Evans told the Christian Post that until manhood is properly defined, culture cannot be saved. He encouraged men who understand the true definition of manhood to mentor other men, teaching them to become who God created them to be. He pointed to Acts 3, where Peter and John, two of Jesus' disciples, help a man who had been paralyzed since birth. Shout out to last Sunday when we heard a sermon about that very scripture. So the question here about submission. I love this quote. He said, the biggest thing a woman can say to a man is, the more you're like that, the more I want to submit to you. And it's funny because I don't believe my wife has ever said that to me. But as soon as I read that, I was like, I like that. You know, like I get it. Like maybe not in those exact words, right? Like that quote, but totally, like I get that. That totally would, like, that would charge me up. I'd be like, oh, I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah, I think that speaks to just kind of this idea, and I don't want to say this is the truth for every guy out there, but I think by and large, men, stereotypically, generalization, broad brush strokes here, men like the idea of leading, you know, to be able to lead somebody, whether that's in battle or, you know, just through town, you know, like it's that idea of like, I don't need a map, you know what I mean?
I don't need a map. I just need a posse. That's all I need.
That's right. I don't need a map. I know where I'm going. I just want you to follow me, you know? Like we like that idea. And so, you know, hearing something like that makes me want to submit to you. It's not about exerting control and forcing submission. It's about willful, like, I'm going to follow you. That is an ego boost, right? I think when we get it wrong when we think that it's about exerting control, and that's probably what he's talking about with the poor definition of submission. Submission seems to be this idea of oppression and submission, but sometimes submission can be willful. It's humility.
Yeah, no, that's well said. I think submission is a response, you know, to go to Ephesians 5, you know, the mystery, Paul said, is this: God gave marriage as a picture of Christ in the church. Christ sacrificially dying for the church, and the church responding by giving themselves back to him. And so I think that's obviously the metaphor for marriage. We sacrificially live and serve our wives.
That's a prickly pineapple.
Yeah, exactly. And her natural response is to respond back with loving submission. And to Tony's point, and to be clear, I mean, I've worked in a dominantly female profession for 20-something years. Sexism is alive. Sexism is alive even in you know, sometimes the Christian marriage, in the sense of, to your point, Shaun, where it's like, oh, submission means I control you, you do what I say. That's just utterly not what the scripture is saying. Again, it's saying that the God's ideal is a husband lovingly serves and sacrifices for her wife, and the natural response to that is to give herself back to him, if you will. And so I just think he's right. Submission is totally misunderstood, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you know, my analogy, which is a dumb one, but I think is actually some truth to it, is if Ephesians 5 is lived out and Lori and I are going out to eat and I say, I want to go to McDonald's, and she says, I want to go to Burger King. If I'm loving her the way Christ loved the church, we're going to Burger King. If she's loving me the way, if she's submitting back to me as Christ, as unto the Lord, she's going to say, I'm going to go to McDonald's. In other words, we're each going to be trying to give each other their own way, if you will. And so
I think compromise
that's
dictates you go to Wendy's.
I guess. And so, so again, a dumb analogy, even dumber by your, even dumber by the compromise to go to Wendy's. But I think there's some truth to it. So.
At least I have a light that makes me look good. That's all I need. Bask in my own glory.
Yeah, some of us need more than a light, unfortunately. I do think so. So I'd like to put a bow on this a little bit, but the notion. So we've kind of, and we don't really have time to really dig into it too much. But I think what we've talked about is there's definitely an element of healthy masculinity, manhood, I guess, that is inseparable from relationship with women. Women, I think, bring that out in us. And whether that's in a marriage relationship, certainly. Brent, you kind of referenced how women can draw that out just in platonic friendships as well. I think we see that. So there's this, that's one element, but I guess I'm more interested. I'd like to hear a little bit more of your guys' thoughts just about, okay, outside of that, talk about kind of this idea of healthy masculinity, just from a personal, like in the context of friendship or in church or in jobs. What would you say, like, how would you kind of define that in a professional setting? Or how do you navigate, like, what's an example, or what can people look to if we're looking for healthy masculinity in a professional setting?
Well, I'd say I'd start in the family. I mean, to me, healthy masculinity is lead your family, love your wife and love your children. You know, don't, you know, the children, you know, and raising your children, what, you know, your responsibility in that, as far as sacrificing for your wife, your responsibility in that. And then, you know, on into professional settings, same way. I guess I've probably thought about it a lot more than sort of normal people, in the sense of my, you know, I've only mostly had women colleagues and women bosses my whole career. And I have found that there's certain nuances to their careers that they've sort of had to go through and overcome, just because of their gender. Is just bizarre to me, you know.
So I guess my question is, put it in the context of a single guy.
Okay.
So I would agree, you know, I mean, especially for the three of us, it's in context of leading a family. Mm-hmm. Somebody who's not in a family. Talk about healthy masculinity for a single person.
So I would say, let's just use a work example, because hopefully we all at some point have a job. So, and I think you could apply this beyond the job kind of structure, but it's just an easier place to explore this. When you, like Brent was talking about leadership, I think leadership requires a degree of humility. It's not a circumstance of you step back and you act with this kind of arrogance and this bravado that you know exactly what's going to happen and you tell people what to do, but instead you have to demonstrate. Sometimes, you know, kind of this idea of leading from behind. I remember when I was a kitchen manager, kitchen supervisor, I was on the shutdown, the closing shift. And so I was responsible for making sure that the kitchen was clean after we finished all of the orders and got everything taken care of. And there was various duties to take care of that were not glamorous. And sometimes I go down the list and I assign these things to people, knowing that some of these were less glamorous than others. For example, washing the dishes at the end of the day in a professional kitchen is not a very glamorous job.
Mm-hmm.
I would occasionally take that job. I didn't have to. I was the leader, but I felt it was more important for me to be able to say, I'm willing to do this job so that I can show you how to do this job, so that next time when I ask you to do this job, you will do this job, you know, and not just do it once, but periodically, you know, like I kind of rotate, and I'd willingly submit myself to a less glamorous job for the purpose of hopefully being a good example, a good leader to them. And I think there is some of that involved. I think there's also just taking the time to consider other people. You know, it's considering, what are they feeling? How do they feel about this? If I'm just telling them what to do, but I'm not demonstrating anything for them, or you know, Jesus accused the Pharisees of burdening the people with laws, but never lifting a finger to help them. You know, and I want to be willing to lift that finger, willing to sometimes say,
reword that.
willing to go in and give a hand.
There you go. I think problem with society is too many people are willing to lift that finger. I think that's the problem.
but I think that's something that, married or single, you can do that. You can demonstrate leadership from
100%.
behind.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah. One of the scriptures that came to my mind, I had to look it up because I couldn't remember the reference, but it's from Romans 12:10. I'll do 9 and 10. Love must be sincere, detest what is evil, cling to what is good. This is the verse I was thinking of. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Outdo yourselves in honoring one another. And I was just thinking about that. I was like, it's not just honoring, like, outdo yourselves, like go the extra mile, right? And make that extra effort. And I think there's an element of just in every relationship that is leadership, right? And I think we have that role as married men, but also as single men.
Yeah.
Did you want to add something, Brent, or?
I was thinking, honestly, this would be a good question to ask a female guest, just because I think they might have a even better perspective. But I would just say, you know, if I was to a single guy, is treating someone of the opposite sex with utmost respect and honor, in every, you know, an equal in every way. And I think, you know, especially not in the sense of, only physical attraction or, that sort of thing. I would just think that would be a way to sort of counter the sort of toxic masculinity idea that has gotten out there because of some of the negative perceptions of men treating women,
men are victims to their own physical desires and can't control themselves. Boys will be boys, kind of stuff, and that really is toxic, and it starts at a young age.
Yeah,
and I think it's good for us to remember that a healthy image of masculinity starts for children, with children. Mm-hmm. And we begin there, and that's how we get healthy husbands. Anyway, I think we're probably running up against our time limit, so we're probably going to finish now. Plenty more to say on this, and maybe we might have to follow up on this because it's a really interesting and very pertinent, I think, topic. But I think we'll probably wrap up here, guys. I'll finish, if I may, with just a quote here, again from Evans. He says this. And I would say this is also biblical. If you're a lame man, you need a couple of men in your life to pick you up. If you're not a lame man, you need to be picking someone else up. And I think that's a really good, just a reminder for us. I think we all spend a certain amount of time on either side of that spectrum. important to kind of make sure that you have people, you surround yourself with people who can either let you carry them or carry you when you need it.
I was just thinking, Shaun's lucky to have you and I, Jesse. And then I was also thinking, you guys didn't even laugh at that. That was funny.
I was waiting for the other shoe to drop.
But I was also thinking, but the phrase, and maybe you've heard this phrase, we all need a Paul, a Timothy, and a Barnabas in our life. Paul being someone who's maybe like more spiritually mature than you, so they can pull you up. And then a Timothy, someone who's sort of younger in the faith that you can pull up. And then a Barnabas who's like an encourager, who's sort of, in the sort of same spiritual realm, if you will, that you are, that can kind of push you forward. And that phrase reminded me of that. And again, I'm just glad that Shaun has you and I, Jesse.
Me too. And I'm glad that I have you too also. I'm going to outdo myself in showing honor to one another.
There you go. Yep.
Jesse's our Paul, Shaun.
All right.
Jesse's our Paul.
We're going to end this episode 13 in the books. Baker's Dozen, Lucky Baker's Dozen finished.
Providential.
+1.
I'm sorry, Providential Baker's Dozen. Thank you guys. Enjoyed this very much. I guess we'll plan on doing this again maybe next week. We'll see.
Sounds good.
All right.
All right. Adios.
Thanks, guys.
See you later.